This is BBC2, and it's time for our weekend visit to the Monster Double Bill. Tonight's midnight pairing brings two science fiction thrillers, one promising instant annihilation, the other a slow and unnerving fade into nothingness. In a few moments, Them, where a 6-year-old girl is found wandering in shock on the New Mexico desert. State Police Sergeant Ben Peterson, played by James Whitmore, investigates a wrecked car, a murdered storekeeper, and enormous footprints linking the scenes. Then, after the news and the cricket highlights at midnight, we join The Incredible Shrinking Man. Scott Carey encounters a strange mist while holidaying with his wife, and months later begins to diminish an inch a week in this defining science fiction classic of the 1950s. From the colossal to the microscopic in tonight's presentation. But first, the answer to that burning question. What is Them?
In the arid, undulating plains of the New Mexican desert, a traumatized child is found wandering alone, unable to speak, and something mammoth has torn through the landscape around her. Soon, scientists Dr. Medford and his daughter Pat join the investigation, uncovering the unthinkable. Giant emmets, born of atomic fallout and spreading towards civilization. Tunnels collapse, the military arrive, and flamethrowers ignite as the desert becomes a battleground for survival. But can humanity stop a species that adapts, multiplies, and marches ever closer to Los Angeles? When we talk about 1950s science fiction, it's tempting to lump every atomic egg into a single Lucien Day-designed basket of flying saucers. But Them, in 1954, is a far more considered creature, a film born out of real anxiety, real craft, and a remarkable degree of restraint. The germ of the idea for Them, dear viewer, came from George Worthing Yeats, a relatively minor screenwriter, but an interesting one nevertheless. The nephew of the head of Republic Pictures, and a man who clearly had a taste for speculative, high-concept storytelling, Yeats became busy in the early atomic age sci-fi space of the 1950s, contributing to scripts such as It Came From Beneath the Sea in 1955, and later working on The Amazing Colossal Man in 1957, and its sequel, War of the Colossal Beast. For Them, Yeats conceived a chillingly simple premise: ordinary ants, emmets, made monstrous by radioactive fallout, courtesy of mankind fucked upness. He initially took the idea to producer director George Powell, yes dear viewer, he of the ultimate time travel feature, The Time Machine, and together they sketched out the broad contours of the story. Powell, however, was tied up with other commitments and advised Yeats to pitch it to Warner Brothers instead. Warners were initially cautious though. Giant ants sounded ridiculous on paper, but the more they discussed it, the more they realised the concept had potential. After several rewrites and refinements, they brought in veteran director Gordon Douglas to helm the project, a dependable, versatile craftsman of many cinematic genres who could handle tension, spectacle, and character with equal confidence. At this point, Warner's had decisions to make. Fresh from the success of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms in 1953, they briefly considered using stop-motion animation in the style of Ray Harryhausen. Ultimately, they rejected this approach. Instead, they opted for large-scale, practical, life-sized ant puppets, roughly 12 feet tall, operated with pulleys and mechanisms. The priority was clear. The creatures had to look and move convincingly enough that audiences would take the threat seriously. They also toyed with two other fashionable gimmicks of the era, 3D and colour. 3D had been a sensation with films like House of Wax, which was in the last BBC2 Horror double bill programme of ours, and colour by this time was increasingly becoming the norm. Both, though, were ultimately vetoed. Warner's instead chose to shoot in stark black and white monochrome, aside from the coloured titles in some prints, and in hindsight, this was an inspired choice, dear viewer. Well, it was for me anyway. For me, I found the monochrome photography gives them its brooding theatricality and finesse. The harsh contrasts, deep shadows, and sun-bleached desert vistas bordering on the acrophobic create a sense of unease that colour might have softened. Rather than feeling dated, the black and white aesthetic elevates the movie into something closer to a Cold War nightmare captured on film, which is precisely what it is. By 1954, Universal had largely abandoned its classic monster stable of revenants, crypt crawlers, and potpourri stitched togethers, shifting instead towards atomic age dread, radiation, mutation, and humanity's own hubris. Films like Universal's Creature from the Black Lagoon and Earth vs. the Flying Saucers brought the threat to terra firma. Warner Brothers followed this trend but gave it their own spin, grounding the terror again in the natural world, from within, with something as familiar and terrifyingly organised as Emmets. Production design is one of the film's greatest strengths. The opening shots of the New Mexico desert are breathtaking, vast, windswept, and hostile. A perfect home for something that has gone terribly wrong. Filming conditions were brutal. Temperatures reportedly reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And actress Joan Weldon, playing scientist Pat Medford, later recalled that she and co-star Edmund Gwenn were close to heat exhaustion in their heavy woolen costumes. It's a reminder that this wasn't just make-believe. The cast quite literally suffered for their art. Performance-wise, Them is remarkably strong for a genre film of its time. Joan Weldon, as we've mentioned, brings intelligence and quiet determination to Pat Medford, while James Arness, as FBI agent Robert Graham, provides a solid, stoic presence. Two performances, however, truly elevate the film for me. First actor Edmund Gwenn as Professor Harold Medford, Pat's father, delivers a beautifully tender portrayal of an empathetic, wise scientist. The bond between father and daughter feels genuine and deeply felt, adding an emotional core that many creature features of the era simply lack. I felt this was a nice touch. Tragically, though, veteran actor Gwenn was suffering from advanced arthritis during filming and often needed assistance to leave the set. He was in agony, yet you would never guess this from his performance.
When man entered the atomic age, he opened a door into a new world. What we'll eventually find in that new world, nobody can predict.
And then, of course, there is James Whitmore as Sergeant Ben Peterson. Frankly, Whitmore is sensational. He embodies the archetypical all-American hero, competent, compassionate, grounded, and utterly believable. His presence commands the screen, even in quieter moments. Watch his facial expressions, body language, and his calm authority and demeanour make him endlessly watchable. He even wore discreet lifts in his shoes to stand more evenly alongside James Arness, a small but telling detail about his commitment to the role. What makes his character so effective is that he feels real, not mythic. When his fate arrives, it genuinely lands with emotional weight. You don't just watch it, you feel it. For me, Whitmore is the heart and soul of Them, and I would argue he gives the finest performance in the entire movie. His denouement is genuinely sad. What a hero.
Jerry, listen to me! Stay where you are! We're gonna get you out of there, but don't move!
Smith, there's 2 ants in here, and I got a strong brood odor. Just like in the nest in New Mexico. Report that to O'Brien. Tell him I must be near the nest. And I'm in a bind with the kids. I can't use the flamethrower. They're right in the line of fire. So tell O'Brien to send in troops.
Notably, the film wisely avoids a heavy romantic subplot. Thank God for that. There is a gentle, understated spark between Weldon and Arness, but it never overwhelms the story. Instead of a melodramatic love affair, we get something more restrained, almost tentative, which suits this tone of this movie perfectly. The sound design is another masterstroke. The eerie insect-like chirruping of the ants becomes a psychological weapon, a sonic warning that keeps you perpetually on edge. You know something dreadful is approaching long before you see it, and for those interested, yes, you dear viewer, that sinister ant chirrup isn't mechanical at all. It's a recorded chorus of bird-voiced tree frogs with the occasional grey tree frog bleeding into it, exactly as they would in the same southeastern wetlands. Composer Bronislaw Paper provides a bold, sweeping score that underscores both the grandeur and the terror of the story. His music amplifies the film's themes, particularly humanity's reckless tampering with nature itself, without ever becoming intrusive. It's a model of how film scoring should work. Powerful, but never overbearing. Modern film scorers, please take note. And yes, look and look again. It's impossible not to smile at the early appearances of Leonard Nimoy, years before Pointy Ears, Vulcan Salutes and Interstellar Logic. Them premiered on June the 19th, 1954, with an earlier premiere in St. Louis, and was an immediate success, earning around $2 million in its first year in the United States and Canada alone, before international release. What is a bit queer, dear viewer, is when Them was released in Sweden, the film became Spindlarna, the spiders, a reminder that not all translators know what an ant looks like. Critically, it was wildly praised, as the New York Times wrote at the time,
"From the moment James Whitmore, playing a New Mexico state trooper, discovers a 6-year-old moppet wandering around the desert in a state of shock, to the time when the cause of that mental trauma is traced and destroyed, Them is taught science fiction."
That line remains apt. The film is frightening without being hysterical, intelligent without being pretentious, and thrilling without resorting to cheap, tacky spectacle. Now, viewer, I don't mind cheap and tacky. I've been to Primark after all, but Them deserves better than that. The ants themselves free at once because that's all that were built. In the climatic Los Angeles sewer sequence, you can briefly glimpse the puppeteering mechanisms, later airbrushed out of home releases, but even this doesn't detract from the tension. Douglas's understated direction, Caper's majestic score, and the uniformly strong performances create something far more than a giant insect movie. It is for me, dear viewer, quite simply a premium example of Cold War science fiction, and for that reason, and the fact I thoroughly enjoyed it from start to finish, it more than lives up to its reputation and absolutely commands repeated viewing. So, dear viewer, Them is most definitely worth a look and look again. And with that, I award it a faultless 5 busy little Emmets out of 5. Genius. On the shimmering waters of a California lake, Scott Carey enjoys a leisurely holiday, until a drifting cloud of strange mist passes over him, leaving a glittering residue, but no permanent damage, at first. Months later, Scott begins to shrink, an inch at a time, bewildering doctors and terrifying his wife Louise. As he dwindles beyond the reach of normal life, the world around him becomes an uncharted wilderness where a cellar spider is a titan and a drop of water can crush like a tidal wave. Yet Scott's sense of self deepens even as his body vanishes. How small can a man become before he slips out of existence entirely? And what lies beyond that final threshold? The Incredible Shrinking Man owes its realization on the big screen to its creator, Richard Matheson. Yes, Mr. Matheson again, a talented writer who has cropped up on our shows numerous times. As well as writing the novel The Shrinking Man, he also wrote the screenplay. There were, of course, a few diversions from what is featured in the book. Elements of sex were diluted for the cinema-going audiences of the 1950s. The book explores the sexual prowess of the main character as he becomes diminutive in height and overall in his manhood. In Matheson's novel, Scott Carey is abused by a child molester, dallies with a big-top midget, and becomes a randy voyeur of his daughter's babysitter, material so salacious it was inevitably excised from the movie for fear of the censors or outright banning of it. The genesis of Matheson's story lies with an innocuous 1950s romantic comedy, funnily enough, called Let's Do It Again. Sounds more like a Merry Millington sexploiter to me, but anyway. In the film, Ray Milland dons Aldo Ray's tit-fur in error and is too big for him. This sparked something in Matheson when he recalled,
"What would happen if a man put on a hat, which he knew was his, and the same thing happened?"
Odd.
Matheson began scribing away at the tail end of 1954 for this, writing the novel in seclusion in a cellar at a rented house at Sand Beach, Long Island. Eventually, when Matheson saw the final cut of the film, he was taken aback at how the cellar setting in the film was uncannily like the one where he penned the story, even down to the tins of paint. Alongside the emasculative themes, Matheson homed in on the creeping paranoia of the emerging Cold War. Matheson further dwelled on horror and anxiety from the mundane here, where everyday things become a hazard and the animal kingdom turns into a danger to life, as our hero gets menaced by a giant spider, ultimately the protagonist's nemesis, and of course, a giant pussy. Before his novel went into print, though, Matheson was approached by Universal and they bought the rights. In a letter to his professor at his alma mater in Missouri, Matheson mentioned,
"I don't expect anything to come of it. I am afraid it would be much too difficult to make into a movie, unless, of course, they hoked it up, as they usually do."
To a lesser degree, he was correct, as the word incredible was squeezed into the title to appeal to the drive-in crowds already wooed with pulpy words to allure them. He struck a deal to write the screenplay himself, though the novel's flashback structure was abandoned in favour of a more linear, cinema-friendly approach. Producer Albert Zugsmith handed Matheson's screenplay to screenwriter Richard Allan Simmons, who swiftly restructured it and, of course, toned it down. Another change Universal wanted was a happier ending. Matheson put his foot down with an over-my-dead-body stance. What was needed, Universal felt, was a reversal in the shrinky-dinkage, instead of a man being absorbed by the cosmos. However, when Tess screened, the audience liked Matheson's original ending, and so, much to Matheson's delight, it remained unchanged. Behind the lens, the talents of Jack Arnold were enrolled. Arnold had already proved he was a dab hand at sci-fi horror genre productions. Here was a man, dear viewer, responsible for gems like It Came From Outer Space, which I loved, but more about that one later on in one of our future programmes. Arnold was also the maestro behind other classics of the sci-fi genre, with another late meta-franchise for Universal, that being The Creature from the Black Lagoon, with a quite wonderful Gillman, and of course its follow-up, Revenge of the Creature. Arnold had also churned out Tarantula, proving Universal could produce giant monster insects on the loose to thrill the pulp hunting hunter at the pictures. Arnold didn't stop there, as after Shrinking Man he brought us two lesser-known examples, but good lesser-known ones nevertheless, such as The Space Children in 1958 and a movie called A Monster on Campus in the very same year. Arnold later moved into TV, directing episodes of Dr. Kildare, Gilligan's Island, The Bionic Woman, and The Love Boat. Arnold is a legend in the genre and lived on to the age of 79, but sadly passed away from arterial sclerosis. Yet, like all wonderful directors of his calibre, his legacy truly lives on, as, let's face it, we would be talking about him now. Of course, behind the skills of such a prolific director, there has to be a bloody good cast. So for the male lead, the talents of Grant Williams were roped in to play Scott Carey, and for me, this is a masterstroke. Perfect casting. As we witnessed in Them with actor James Whitmore, Williams brings the sympathy essential for the character's plight to resonate with us, the audience. Grant Williams carries an air of the forlorn, an isolated sadness as he battles alone in a world of giants. His performance is expressive, it's valiant, and deeply touching, making the role entirely his own. When one knows about Williams' background, one can sense why he is so successful for this character.
See how funny I am? The child that looks like a man. Go on, laugh, Louise. Be like everyone else. It's all right. Well, why can't you look at me? Look at me!
Grant Williams was born in 1931, bitten by the acting bug early on, and served in the US Air Force between 48 and 52 during the Korean War. After this, he found his calling in the thespian world by pursuing studies in acting and developing another facet to his talents as a skilled pianist. Williams bounced back into acting with real momentum, and at just 21 he won the Barter Theatre Award, which brought a punishing summer season in Virginia. New plays each week, endless rehearsals, and nightly shows must have been exhausting. That led to off-Broadway work and the odd TV appearance. Universal apparently liked what they saw. They got in touch, screen-tested him, and signed him up within 48 hours. He worked with Jack Arnold on two films prior to Shrinking Man, the western Red Sundown and the film noir Outside the Law. Despite becoming an up-and-coming star in Tinseltown, Williams was very guarded about his private life, avoiding gossip. Yet according to some sources, there were rumours about Williams' sexuality, which back then was a big deal. As we know, dear viewer, for an actor to wear the contractually approved smile meant a life of denial. The Incredible Shrinking Man was definitely his crowning glory, and Jack Arnold was reputedly delighted with Williams' performance, although it took its toll on him, coming at a brutal physical cost. The lights left him temporarily blinded for a week, he cracked a vertebra on his neck, and badly burned his shoulder. Next, he appeared in another underrated gem, which would be remiss of me not to mention, The Monolith Monsters. It wasn't directed by Jack Arnold, though he did write the story. Here Williams plays a geologist investigating bizarre rocks that crash into the desert and, once hit with water, shoot up to grotesque tower-like heights, and will happily turn you to stone if you so much as brush by them. Dismissed by some as pure schlock, it's actually a smart, ruthless, and far more effective slice of 50s sci-fi than its goofy premise ever suggests.
Just like Ben. Their bodies are turned to stone.
The working relationship with Jack Arnold turned into a lasting friendship. In a later interview, Arnold said,
Grant Williams was one of the best actors around, but the studio didn't give him the right parts, and his career never took off. He had the wrong looks for the time and never caught on with the public.
The Leech Woman came next and marked Williams' final film under his Universal International contract. He plays second fiddle here to Colleen Gray's June Talbot, a wealthy alcoholic who ventures into the jungle in search of eternal youth, only to discover a grisly price. The elixir, distilled from a rare orchid, must be mixed with the pineal gland. Yet for all its camp appeal, this to me is hardly a career apex for Williams, and it feels like a distinctly underwhelming farewell for the leading man of one of Universal's biggest hits, The Incredible Shrinking Man. Williams then moved to Warner Brothers, where he starred in the absolutely essential psychological thriller The Couch. Put that one down on your list for watching. Scripted by psycho author Robert Bloch. Eventually, Williams shifted more fully into TV, reaching a peak with the series Hawaiian Eye, though by this point the cracks were beginning to show. Williams was reputedly pissed on set, was inappropriately vocal with some of the actors, and is said to have rubbed actor Jack Webb up the wrong way during his 1967 Dragnet appearance as a priest, and a row that was so heinous that, so the story goes, quietly earned him an unofficial Hollywood blacklist. By the end of his career, Williams found himself marooned in the gloriously rancid Al Adamson exploiter Brain of Blood. Barely 40, Williams looks here less like a leading man and more like a casualty of both Hollywood and this crappy film. His career fizzled out with the obscure sexploitation item How's Your Love Life, centred on a promiscuous theatre company. Of the film, Williams remarked,
One of my last pictures was edited into a near-porno film. The ads for it suggested that I was playing a character who was gay. I would never play a homosexual.
Questions have long swirled around Williams' lifelong bachelor status. Some assumed he was straight, others wondered otherwise, and while he was a devout Catholic, there's no clear record of how that shaped his inner life. What we do know is that as his film career waned, he found real purpose in teaching acting. His students remembered him as demanding, but deeply caring about their progress, with one describing him as a brilliant, generous teacher. In the classroom, he was assertive and disciplined, yet outside of it he could be warm and gregarious. Those close to him sensed an underlying sorrow, though. As a former student reflected, he was fundamentally a tragic character. There was a great deal of sadness in him. In a rare moment of candour with an LA Times reporter, Williams himself confessed,
I have a private life that I think is horrible.
Williams died in the Veterans Administration Hospital after complications from blood poisoning. In the period before his death, those close to him believed the loss of his mother, only weeks earlier, had deepened his drinking and his despair. A friend later recounted that when Williams flew to New York to be at her bedside, he asked his mother simply, "Do you love me?" Her response, chilling in its finality, was, "I hate you." Williams died at just 53 years of age. He is buried in the Los Angeles National Cemetery. His headstone carries only his name, his rank, Staff Sergeant in the US Air Force, and his service in Korea, alongside his birth and death dates. There is no mention of Hollywood, of stardom, or of the incredible shrinking man. It feels less like an omission than a quiet reflection of who he was, a man who never really sought the spotlight in life, and who, in death, chose to be remembered simply as himself. Alongside Williams was Randy Stuart, playing long-suffering wife Louise Carey. Stuart isn't asked to do fireworks, a role is deliberately tethered to domesticity, but she brings a quiet, wounded dignity that keeps Louise from becoming merely a nagging 50s stereotype. She has to navigate the thankless terrain of being supportive, frightened, and increasingly helpless as her husband literally slips beyond her grasp. And Stuart sells that with a restrained, almost heart-aching sincerity. She may not have Williams' existential torment to chew on, but she grounds the film emotionally, the human anchor, as Scott drifts ever further into the abyss of cellular reduction. It's a measured, unspectacular performance in the best sense. Exactly what the picture needs, even if history has rather unfairly remembered the special effects more than the woman holding the narrative together.
When I married you, I meant what I said. And as long as you've got this wedding ring on, you've got me. Come on now, let's go home, huh?
The incredible shrinking man was treated with a fair degree of disdain at Universal early on, nothing more than an exploiter with a modest budget and strange premise. But when studio executives saw the final cut, they changed their tune and quietly gave it a subtle ad campaign that helped it find its audience, and they loved it.
Yes, it was one of the biggest successes of our science fiction film. It grossed an awful lot of money and practically saved Universal International at that time because they were suffering from lack of theater attendance because of television at that time. And this certainly brought them back into the theater and brought them back in sufficient numbers so that they made a huge profit on the film. And it's become, in some ways, to many people, a classic. It's one of my favorite films.
Matheson himself conceded there wasn't, in the conventional sense, much of a story in either book or movie, aside from the extraordinary circumstances visited upon an ordinary suburban couple, and it's that grounding in the familiar, even as the implausible unfolds, that gives the piece such resonance. What truly elevates the film beyond gimmickry is the taut, incisive direction of Jack Arnold, a man who by the mid-1950s had carved out a genuine niche as one of Universal's most reliable and expressive sci-fi directors. Arnold's films are noted for their atmospheric black and white cinematography and a clarity of vision that belies their B-movie budgets. He understood that science fiction works best when the extraordinary is filtered through a recognisable, almost banal reality. That's why the extended sequence of Scott Carey battling commonplace threats, a cat, a spider, becomes so gripping, by treating special effects as extensions of the story rather than spectacle. Arnold keeps our focus to the emotional core. The cinematography amplifies this visual atmosphere. Much of the illusion was achieved through rear projection and oversized props, paired with careful matching of the actors to these giant elements. Techniques advanced for their time and handled with meticulous precision, even if the primitive matte shots occasionally betray the process. And then in the basement sequences, Arnold's direction makes the household world feel unknowably vast and hostile, a claustrophobic cosmos of danger. The cat attack in the dollhouse was performed with Orangey, Hollywood's favourite feline, lured inside with food to get the precise performance required. The spider battle, a sequence drawn from the book, demanded real arachnids. Arnold found the Black Widow too tiny to work with, so favoured tarantulas instead that's used here. Arnold coaxed tarantulas into action with puffs of air as he had done on Tarantula, but had to contend with the brutal heat from intense lighting that sadly led to dozens dying before the scene was completed. Even the huge droplets falling from the boiler heater weren't opticals, they were Johnny bags filled with water.
Then I remembered my youth, kind of ill-spent in New York, where I found in my father's drawer some rubber things. And I didn't know what they were. So I filled one with water and tied it, and I had a nice tear. And I took it on the roof, and I used it as balm. I dropped it on people. And it made a wonderful, it splattered all over the place. So I said, that's what we're going to do. So I turned to the crew that was with me, and I said, well, one of you guys give me a condom. And they looked at me, you know. I said, come on now, one of you guys got a condom, give it to me. So one of them sheepishly gave me a condom. I says, good, fill it with water and tie it off. He said, do what? Fill it with water and tie it off. And go up there and drop it. So he did, and he dropped it, and it was perfect. It had a kind of a tear-shaped shape, and splattered, just like a drop would. I said, that's what we're going to do. So I ordered 100 gross of condoms.
That's the level of inventiveness on display here. So resourceful and perfectly tuned to the film's off-kilter world. Matheson even wrote a script for a sequel, believe it or not, The Fantastic Little Girl, in which Louise Carey also shrinks and finds her husband, but this project was scrapped. For me, The Incredible Shrinking Man is nothing short of a masterpiece. A true fusion of exceptional direction and action. Its existential ending isn't just dramatic flourish, it's a plunge into metaphysical panic that lingers well after the picture ends. While Ray Milland stares into the cosmos and X, the man with the X-ray eyes that we saw, Scott Carey dissolves into it, and one is left pondering, if a man can shrink into nothingness, might he become part of the cosmos? A disembodied spirit? Is that what happens to us when we die? These are questions that don't fade when the credits roll, they linger. Visually, the film's impressive sets, particularly the oversized domestic interiors, can even remind one of Devil Doll in terms of scale and ingenuity. What Arnold achieves is an absorbing take on a man's quest for survival against all odds in a world that is at once familiar but utterly alien. The Incredible Shrinking Man remains as potent now as it did then, a rare science fiction film that doesn't just entertain, but expands the mind. Based on all the above, I'm wholeheartedly awarding The Incredible Shrinking Man 5 diminishing dwarves out of 5, a pairing of large and little that ranks among the very best BBC2 double bills so far.
Good evening, you're watching BBC2. Our Monster Horror Double Bill season continues this evening at 10 o'clock. Voodoo Island, a remote tropical paradise earmarked for development, has one notable drawback. The locals are ruled by witchcraft, strange creatures roam the jungle, and the foliage itself has a taste for flesh. Boris Karloff stars as Dr. Knight, sent by nervous investors to uncover the truth. Then, after the news at around 11:20, our colour feature, Phantom of the Rue Morgue, where, one by one, young women are savagely murdered, and the police are left confounded. Carl Malden leads as Dr. Mares of the Paris Zoo in this vivid retelling of Poe's classic tale, but first, we pay a visit to Voodoo Island.
In a remote Pacific island, a team of developers arrive dreaming of a luxury resort, only to find the place anything but welcoming. Sent to investigate is famed skeptic Dr. Philip Knight, a man who scoffs at superstition until he's confronted with locals ruled by dark rites and a jungle whose vines seem almost alive. As the party pushes deeper inland, Dr. Knight begins to doubt his rational mind. Is his paradise cursed by ancient forces, or is it something far stranger?
Claire? What?
Voodoo Island, shot in Hawaii, is directed by Reginald Le Bourg and features Boris Karloff appearing here in what looks like a cuprinol spray tan. Poor dear Boris, he lisps his way through 76 minutes of terminal inertia. This isn't Karloff commanding the screen. Good God, no, dear viewer. This is Karloff wondering how long before his next scotch. Despite the title, we don't actually reach Voodoo Island until the film is already halfway over. And when we finally arrive, it turns out voodoo here means absolutely bugger all. No rituals to speak of, not much mythology, and no atmosphere. Just vague muttering about curses and some dolls that look like they came free with a cereal box. Remember those freebies? Till lackluster parents saw their children choke to death. Geography isn't this film's strong suit either. Voodoo is Caribbean, not South Pacific, but why let anthropology spoil a perfectly dull screenplay? The jungle has all the menace of a garden centre clearance aisle, a cheap, joyless fraud that couldn't spook an aspidistra. The pacing is glacial. A film supposedly about jungle peril, zombies and supernatural menace spends most of its runtime with people standing around, talking earnestly, sweating profusely, and achieving absolutely nothing. When danger finally appears, it takes the form of the least convincing man-eating plants ever committed to celluloid, cheap, rubbery, faintly penile horrors that wobble about cockeyed. One of the cast includes Adam West in his screen debut, a blink-and-you'll-miss-it performance, in case you didn't notice, or ever will. And if you haven't seen Voodoo Island, dear viewer, how I envy you. You haven't wasted 76 minutes of your life as I did. There's also a curious subplot involving what I can only describe as light sapphic shenanigans. Claire, played by Platinum Frigidaire Jean Engstrom, is older, cooler, and predatory in a 1950s dykish way. She rebuffs the himbo male lead, played by actor Rhodes Reason, and takes an interest in Sarah instead, played by actress Beverly Tyler.
Looking at the night, the tropical plants, or just dreaming?
Just dreaming, I guess.
Better not let the great Knight know you were thinking of something else on his time.
You don't like him.
You know, Adams, I could do a lot for you if you let me. Your hair, the way you wear it, it's old-fashioned. The shaping of your eyes and just the proper shade of makeup. The right color of lipstick for your lips. And your clothes, I know how I would design them.
I could make you become alive, dear. I'm going for a walk.
Now, dear viewer, is it exploitation to spice it up a bit? A clumsy attempt to rile moralists? Or just the filmmakers accidentally trying to be edgy and daring? It's hard to say, especially since Claire is swiftly dispatched before anything remotely scandalous can happen, probably to punish a Hays Code perversion of the time. There was also a rumour of a nude scene for foreign release, an idea quietly abandoned, but even titillation wouldn't save this one. Karloff himself does what he can, despite looking a bit fragile at times, and somehow manages to make a colossal arsehole of his character into something faintly charming, which says more about him than the movie. But even he can't rescue this from its own terminal dullness, dear viewer. By the time the plants start attacking, you're less frightened than relieved that something is finally happening. Already by now, you're deep in the arms of Morpheus. One thing I will say, there is a decent dispatching of a brat by the carnivorous flora, which made me chuckle, though I'm pretty sure that wasn't the intended reaction. Released in 1957 on a drive-in double bill with The Pharaoh's Curse, which was marginally better, and I mean marginally, Voodoo Island was later titled Silent Death for a reissue by Bel Air in 1963, as if we hadn't suffered enough the first time round, alongside their far superior The Black Sleep, for the reissue titled Dr. Cadman's Secret. Voodoo Island was meant to launch a Karloff trilogy. After Frankenstein 1970, the following year, being involved with the same production people, he took the paycheck and scarpered. Who really could blame him? In the end, Voodoo Island isn't spooky, isn't fun, and isn't even enjoyably bad. It's pure tedium. Well, I found it to be so. A film where the marketing is infinitely better than the movie it represents. So sadly, it gets one shriveled rubber jungle menace out of 5. Pointless and as limp and dry as a forgotten Durex in a spinster's handbag, and not even decent B-movie fodder. I'm sure, dear viewer, you can tell I didn't really like it.
Look out!
All right? Sure?
Coconut crabs. Might be more around. Get away from the trees.
In the gas-lit labyrinth of turn-of-the-century Paris, terror stalks the night as nubile young women are murdered in frenzied, inexplicable attacks. The police are baffled, and suspicion soon falls upon Dr. Marais, the intense head of the city's zoological institute, whose radical experiments blur the genetics between man and beast. As the killings grow bolder, a darker presence moves through the inky blackness, one with a motive rooted in obsession and scientific folly. Can the truth be uncovered before Paris succumbs to fear, or will the phantom strike again in the heart of the city? In the wake, dear viewer, of House of Wax, Can-Can's Phantom of the Rue Morgue, based loosely, bow loosely, on Edgar Allan Poe's Murders in the Rue Morgue, it's yet another adaptation of the same tale, and yet, for some inexplicable reason, Phantom remains far less well known. Released around the same time as John Huston's Moulin Rouge, the film delivers a similarly rapturous barrage of frills, garters, and plenty of ooh-la-la. The can-can sequences are exuberant and frankly quite glorious, and the high kicks must have been a knockout in 3D. Except for another inexplicable reason, while Phantom was filmed in 3D, it was released flat. In many ways, this film marks the death rattle of the 3D craze that flared brightly and burned out fast in the early 1950s. As a movie, Phantom offers both glamour and gruel, sometimes in the same breath. Director Roy Del Ruth orchestrates the mayhem with a surprisingly sure hand here. Del Ruth brought with him an instinctive feel for rhythm, for spectacle and bodies in motion. That background serves Phantom well. His camera is very rarely static. It glides, prowls and lunges through spaces, making the film feel alive even when the script occasionally stumbles. One moment we're watching a knife-throwing act that genuinely makes the palms sweat, wanted me. The next we're plunged into a murder staged as a piece of abstract art in a Jackson Pollock frenzy. Other visual treats abound. Cracking rooftop sequence where Claude Duffan's inspector demonstrates how the killer might have made his escape, if he is indeed the culprit. These flourishes don't feel like padding. They're part of Del Ruth's belief that cinema should move.
Go on. Go ahead. You can make it.
You'll never make it. Can't you see that?
Go on.
Accompanying the surprisingly slashy murder sequences is the thunderous, blousy score by David Buttolph, which adds real frisson to the violence. While these killings aren't in the same league as the spiteful dispatches of 1980s slasher horror, they feel like a clear harbinger of what was just around the corner. The loosening of censorship in the late 1950s and early 60s in the UK, and even the stylized slaughter of the giallo thrillers of the 60s and 70s that we all love. Despite its vintage, Del Ruth revels in the aftermath. His camera lingers on lurid mise-en-scène, laddered tight lacerations, and more blood than you might expect. He pushes at the deeply uncomfortable marriage and censors nightmare of sex and violence. So much so, in fact, that the UK censors hacked the picture about when it came to Blighty, just to scrape by with an X certificate. There's even a sly nod to what the murders might have looked like had censorship not slammed on the brakes, when we see the maniacal ape smash a mannequin to buggery, a moment that's as revealing as it is slightly unsettling. It's worth noting that Del Ruth only directed one other horror film in the 1950s, The Alligator People, a swampland gothic oddity about humans transformed into reptiles. Out of more than 120 films on his CV, only 3 are horror pictures, which is a shame, really, because Phantom proves he could deliver a solid shrieker when given the chance. On the performance front, actor Steve Forrest makes for a likeable Paul Dupin, desperately trying to prove his innocence while inadvertently assisting Inspector Bonnard, played by Claude Dauphin, in uncovering the truth. The cat-and-mouse game between criminal and cops is neatly mirrored in the verbal sparring between Bonnard and Dupin. Some of Bonnard's theories about criminality are absolute corkers, ones that had me chuckling. And remember, dear viewer, to check the lobes.
The great Lombroso studied the physiognomies of hundreds of criminals. Certain characteristics, for instance, a lack of earlobes. And I notice you have no earlobes.
He never fooled me. I always knew he was a criminal type.
Forrest didn't escape the production unscathed. Warner Press notes at the time proudly informed us that
up-and-coming star Steve Forrest has a brother who has already arrived at the top, one Dana Andrews. Incidentally, it was Steve who sprained his back during filming of Phantom of the Rue Morgue as a result of the most exotic accident in the annals of Warner Brothers. He was injured on a set representing the Paris Zoo by tripping over an elephant's foot while being chased by a lion.
Another thing I'd be remiss not to mention, this marks the final furry costumed outing for Charles Gomorrah, ape actor extraordinaire, and one of his most memorable simian incarnations. His mannerisms and facial expressions are remarkably convincing. For the more athletic sequences, Gomorrah was doubled, as the physical demands of the role would have been far too much, especially considering he'd suffered a coronary back in 1943. Sensibly, his health came first. The film is bluntly a remake of Murders in the Rue Morgue, which opened this season of double bills, and it does it proud, just as House of Wax gleefully apes Mystery of the Wax Museum. Pardon the pun. And then there's Carl Malden, 18 years before the streets of San Francisco. Good old Malden, he of the nose like a pixie's bum. Here he plays Dr. Moraes, a role some claim he was woefully miscast in. I don't buy that for a second, really. In my humblest opinion, dear viewer, and for what it's worth, Malden is perfectly serviceable, wide-eyed, unsettling, and creepy when required. Phantom of the Rue Morgue is an elusive little movie, and a genuine surprise inclusion in the horror double bills. I'm very glad I finally caught up with it, to be honest with you. A hidden gem in what is, admittedly, a very mixed bag season of double bills. So, with this film, I'm giving Phantom of the Rue Morgue 4 dangly bracelets out of 5. Go seek, and ye shall fiend.
Room, monsieur.
You're watching BBC2. We bring our monster double bill season to a close tonight at 10 p.m. King Kong starring Fay Wray and none other than the eighth wonder of the world. Still the most celebrated fantasy film of them all and famed for its groundbreaking effects. Kong is taken from his jungle domain to New York, where he breaks free, rampaging through Manhattan before that unforgettable showdown atop the Empire State Building. Then, after the news at around 20 to midnight, we end our season with Superbeast, where a renowned pathologist travels to the Philippines to investigate a string of brutal killings and uncovers a remote research outpost where experiments on psychopaths are producing monstrous results. But first, a true classic to thrill you as King Kong prepares to challenge mankind itself.
In the restless bustle of Depression-era New York, filmmaker Carl Denham sets sail in search of something wondrous, and finds it on the uncharted shores of Skull Island. Among the expedition is aspiring actress Anne Darrow, whose beauty awakens the fascination of a towering creature the islanders call Kong. When the colossal ape is captured and brought back to Manhattan, all turns to catastrophe. Chains snap, crowds run for their lives, and the city becomes Kong's new jungle. As Kong climbs towards the heavens with Anne in his grasp, one question looms. Is a real monster the beast? Or is it the civilization that chained him? King Kong isn't just a monster movie. It's a modern myth born at exactly the right cultural moment. Released in 1933 at the height of the Great Depression, it combined spectacle, shock and ferocity in a way audience had never experienced before, and it worked spectacularly. Director Miriam C. Cooper's idea began with a single image, a giant ape on top of the tallest building in the world, fighting aeroplanes. There was no finished script, no refined theme. The story was built backwards to justify the spectacle. Cooper and co-director Ernest B. Shadesack were physical men, adventurers, former wrestlers, and they conceived cinema in muscular, confrontational terms. Their project went through multiple titles before becoming King Kong, a change pushed through by executive producer David Selznick in one of his last acts at RKO Pictures, who were desperate for a hit and accepted the challenge. Edgar Wallace, initially drafted in to shape the story, sadly dying of pneumonia in Hollywood in 1932 without seeing the end result, left a script that was fragmented and slightly unfinished. What followed was a highly unusual production where effects capability drove narrative decisions rather than the other way around. Actress Jean Harlow refused the lead, but Canadian actress Fay Wray accepted it instead, and dear viewer, aren't we lucky that she did? Director Cooper famously promised her she would be playing alongside the tallest, darkest leading man in Hollywood. She thought he meant Cary Grant. How wrong she was.
You can't believe it. Your eyes open wider. It's horrible, Anne, but you can't look away. There's no chance for you, Anne, no escape. You're helpless, Anne, helpless. There's just one chance. If you can scream, but your throat's paralyzed. Try to scream, Anne, try. Perhaps if you didn't see it, you could scream. Throw your arms across your eyes and scream, Anne. Scream for your life!
Ray's performance in King Kong pushed pre-code boundaries, dear viewer. Torn clothing, sustained terror, and a bit of sexual menace. Material that would soon become impossible under the Hays Code. Initially, actor Joel McCrea was to be brought over from The Most Dangerous Game to play the lead. However, he refused due to the physically demanding scenes, and so it went to actor Bruce Cabot instead, who, at the time, was doubling for McCrea, whilst working with Miriam Cooper on The Most Dangerous Game. Special effects wizard Willis H. O'Brien was the true architect of King Kong. Using stop-motion techniques refined on The Lost World, made in 1925, which didn't unfortunately capture the public imagination that much, mainly due to its lack of sound, I assume, and abandoned models from a repudiated movie called Creation, O'Brien brought creatures to life with unprecedented weight. And what's key here, they had personality. Cooper, Shadesack and O'Brien physically acted out the fights, drawing on wrestling and boxing experiences, something visible in Kong's movements, guards, throws, and finishing blows. Multiple Kong models were used, subtly altering his size and appearance between Skull Island and New York, as in the New York sequences, the Skull Island model, with its long arms and low ass, looked rather comical against the skyscrapers when he goes AWOL in the metropolis, searching for the character of Anne. King Kong was quite violent for 1933. Pre-code brutality consisted of men and natives being crushed, chewed and hurled into an abyss, and one poor bitch is nonchalantly tossed aside when Kong realises it's not Anne, and she falls several hundred feet to her death in Kong's quest in the cityscape. The body count in this movie reaches around 40. Many of these moments were cut in later reissues, as well as RKO, having the prints significantly darkened and were only restored decades later. Reminders that this was not conceived as a children's fantasy. Oddly, when released in the UK, the film was awarded with an adults-only suitability classification. However, in other areas of the UK, this was overruled, and children could even see this on their own. I suppose the most infamous missing scene in the film follows the log bridge sequence. Sailors fall into a ravine and are attacked by giant spiders and other insectoid prehistoric horrors. There are rumours this was shot and that preview audiences screamed, fled the theatre, or talked through the rest of the film because of its horrific impact. However, this would need verification. Some reports suggest this was partially shot, and others state that there were just a few segments in the can. Whichever is to be believed, it would be amazing to have seen it, as it sounds gloriously gruesome, dear viewer. Just as the missing Chaney film London After Midnight from 1927 is considered a lost cinematic gem and horror holy grail, this sequence may very well be a close second. Cooper allegedly removed the sequence himself the next day after preview screenings, believing it stopped the film dead anyway. The footage, if it ever existed, has never been found. Director Peter Jackson's 2005 reconstruction gives us a glimpse of what was lost and why it was cut, and we can glimpse a little bit of that here. Kong's arrival in New York transforms myth into modern spectacle. Originally planned for Yankee Stadium, the exhibition was shifted to a Broadway theatre for sharper satire. The Empire State Building climax combines studio sets with aerial footage, later revised in a 1952 reissue. The attacking pilots are played by Cooper and Shadesack themselves. As Cooper put it, "We should kill the son of a bitch ourselves." It would be remiss of me not to mention that Max Steiner's symphonic score definitely helped redefine what film music could do, even if it wasn't strictly the first of its kind. The gamble paid off, as King Kong had a record-breaking opening and its popularity was seismic, and it was also a film widely credited with saving RKO from bankruptcy, and importantly, went on to become a true icon in pop culture. Even if you have never seen the movie, and if you haven't, why the hell haven't you? The image of Kong dominating the skyline has become truly iconic and dominated plenty of cult film enthusiasts' bedroom walls throughout time. King Kong became a cultural phenomenon and remains so. The immediate sequel, Son of Kong, softened the monster under the production code, and another stablemate, Mighty Joe Young, refined the sympathetic giant. But really, through time, it was in 1954 Godzilla emerged and a similar icon was born, this time out of scales, not fuzz. Different in origin, but speaking the same philosophy King Kong invented. A giant spectacle as terror, destruction is allegory, and the monster as a mirror held up to society. Kong and his contemporaries are the sum of the beast in us all. After returning to King Kong yet again, dear viewer, I'm reminded that this was one of the very first films I ever saw, along with The Phantom of the Opera, sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of a chunky wooden box television. And I'm pleased to report that, seeing it again, nothing has changed. This is still high-octane stuff. It's still thrilling, still inventive, still completely confident in what it's doing, and it's easy to see why, across generations, King Kong hasn't just endured, but became a bastion of popular culture. Has the hype lessened over time? To me personally, dear viewer, the answer to that is no, it hasn't. It remains, for me, as magical, as enthralling, and as exciting now as it was when I first saw it all those years ago. So, dear viewer, I can only give this the score it truly deserves, and that is going to be 5 Skull Islands out of 5. Yes, it's really that good. An absolute must-see.
What was it? Oh, come on!
Renowned pathologist Dr. Alex Pardee arrives to investigate a series of brutal, inexplicable killings in the Philippines. The trail leads her to a remote research compound where Dr. Bill Taggart conducts experiments on violent criminals, experiments meant to reshape the human mind, but in essence has created something feral, powerful, and uncontrollable. As Pardee moves deeper into the wild, Alex realizes the research outpost isn't the only thing concealing the answers. The jungle swallows evidence as quickly as it offers it. Can she escape the savage nightmare closing in around her, or is the doctor's rancor inextinguishable? Well, Superbeast, dear viewer, most odd. The horror double bill, when broadcast, promised King Kong as part of this double bill, a towering monument of 1930s cinema, as we've seen, and then followed it with Superbeast, a largely forgotten Filipino-shot jungle horror from 1972. What jolted audiences possibly wasn't suspense or terror, that's for sure, but the sudden completely unannounced appearance of real autopsy footage a la Faces of Death, an image that arrives without warning, context or mercy. It did it again on the 3rd of March 1984 during the film's second, but last UK broadcast. This is another reheated Island of Dr. Moreau and Most Dangerous Game hybrid, not dissimilar to The Twilight People from the same year. Originally the film was titled Evil Eye, and it was shot in the Philippines back-to-back with Daughters of Satan, both produced by exploitation stalwart Aubrey Schenck. This is technically the livelier of the two, which really isn't much of a recommendation for it. Direction fell to Schenk's son George after original director Alan Miner was fired. It's Schenk's only turn behind the camera before a far more lucrative career producing the TV show NCIS, and the inexperience shows in his first film. The pacing is barbiturately slow, scenes are fragmented and shilly-shallied to the nth degree. Despite a strong title and a silly but half-promising premise, Superbeast is so inert, it's like being slowly smothered by beige. There are moments, brief spasms, that threaten to revive the corpse, a sluggish dream sequence involving a beast man, and the most chaste interspecies sex imaginable. A canoe trip that abruptly dumps Antoinette Bower over a waterfall, which is hilarious. There's just no reaction. You see her in the canoe, and then it looks like a lolly stick being thrown over a waterfall. It's so badly done, it's confusing, and you wait for the explanation to thankfully explain what the hell it was all about. There's a panicked plane evacuation in Guam before a gas grenade is thrown into it, and hilariously explodes before hitting the ground. But none of this really matters. The cast doesn't help either. Antoinette Bower, playing the bra-burned professor lead, looks bored, baffled, and faintly offended. Maybe a little stoned, I don't know. Craig Littler plays a strangely overzealous hippie scientist, later resurfacing as Jason of Star Command. Actor Vic Diaz does his usual crooked cop turn, while actor Harry Lauter appears in his last film role. Technically, it barely scrapes through. John Chambers, special effects artist, relatively fresh from Planet of Apes, is strangled by budget. The makeup effects suggest acromegaly via the missing link. The super beasts on show aren't particularly frightening. I've been more unsettled, dear viewer, by what I have seen fingering the fruit in Asda or Walmart, depending where you are in the hemisphere. The photography wobbles, the score limps, and the autopsy footage, clearly a late cynical addition to secure an R rating, clashes horribly, like the fashions on view, with the film's otherwise provincial tone. Following directly after King Kong, Superbeast makes for one of the most strangest and most dispiriting horror double bills so far. One of this double bill is a cultural titan, the other is a sweaty, joyless trudge. It's pretty bad, and on par with Voodoo Island. This earns 1.5 autopsies out of 5, a dull, hug-ugly film that closed an otherwise eclectic BBC2 season on a resoundingly low note, and ends this series of monster double bills for the summer of 1978. Well, there we are. Talk about ending on a bum note. Good God, Superbeast, that was arduous.
And your highlights from this season were...
Probably The Man with the X-Ray Eyes. that was magnificent. And of course, the classics, the sturdy old reliables.
And what about Voodoo Island?
Oh, terrible, utterly terrible. But I've seen worse, and as we always say, the scores here are my own personal scores. For someone out there, that and Superbeast might be a hidden gem.
Well, Crab, I'm afraid I shall have to take my leave.
Take your leave?
Yes, I've been called up. I'm off to provide the voiceover for the Generation Game conveyor belt with Larry Grayson. Nobody says fondue set or cuddly toy with quite my authority.
Oh no. Well, that's it then, I guess. I shall miss you, Continuity.
I'll still see you at the wrap party. I can never resist a cheese football or a discreet nibble on a cocktail sausage.
But we've got 1979 to do. I can't manage all of that on my own.
Ah, but things were changing. The old logo went. And the BBC began its inevitable march toward the 1980s.
So what does that mean for us?
It means you relax, Crab, and allow me to take you gently down the wormhole as we move into 1979.
Are you sure that's your hand, Continuity? I know what you BBC types are like.
Of course it is. Goodbye, Crab.
Hello? Anyone there?
Hello?
Oh, there you are, old bean. The other chap sent me. I'm your new continuity announcer for 1979.
Good grief.
Would you like to see my credentials?
No, I think you're quite safe where you are, thank you. Well then, dear viewer, welcome to 1979 and on to our next programme. Up here to have plenty to be getting on with.
Where would you like me to start? Mind if I toke? It helps me get into the zone, you know.
By all means, this is going to be fun. Right then, one and all, stay retro, be groovy, and until next time on Look, Look and Look Again, cheerio.